Welcome, and let's talk Georgia and the Six Nations. Thank you for joining me on this Periscope live stream. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. Please feel free to put any comments in here, also to share it with your friends and stuff. And if you're watching this recording on YouTube, then how about giving it a like? Thanks. So let's talk Georgia and the Six Nations. It's one of those topics that comes up at this time of year every year, or at least the last few years. It's something I've talked about before, and there is, if you want to get back on my website, there is a discussion on there where I talk about having an Eight Nations thing, which, funnily enough, is something that came up on the BBC recently, and I talked about it back in November. I must admit I'm now starting to cool on the idea a little bit, and I'll tell you why. I am a great supporter of the Tier 2 nations, and I did do a video recently looking at the three things I think they need to stop being Tier 2 nations and become Tier 1 nations. So go have a look at that. But basically it's money, home test matches against Tier 1 teams, and a regular competition that they can be in. I think those are the big building blocks that these teams need. So let's just have a quick look historically first, and look at the last two teams that have made the step up from Tier 2 to Tier 1. So first that was Italy, coming into the Six Nations, and then Argentina forcing their way into the Rugby Championship. So Italy joined the Six Nations in the 2000, and if we have a quick look at what they had to do to get there, in 95 they managed to beat Ireland and Argentina. Then in 97 they beat France and Ireland twice, and then in 98 they beat Scotland and Argentina. So they had it over a number of years. They beat Tier 1 nations, and they beat 3 out of the 5 teams that were in the 5 nations already. And that's how they forced their way into the Six Nations, or part of how they forced their way into the Six Nations. If we look at Argentina, they came third in Rugby World Cup in 2007 without any regular competition, or Tier 1 competition. And on the way to coming third, they beat Ireland, Scotland and France twice. If we look at Georgia have been doing very well. Obviously they've been top of their European comp for a number of years now. They went to the Pacific Islands and drew 1 game and won 2 games, and have been performing very well. But if we look at their record against Tier 1 nations, Georgia have never beaten a Tier 1 nation. And so they haven't been. Now, one of those points people make is what opportunities have they had? I agree, they've not been having very many opportunities, and they need more games against Tier 1 nations. And they're one of the 2 teams, or one of the best Tier 2 teams, along with Japan, who need greater exposure to Tier 1 nations. But at the moment, they're not. Whilst they're making a very strong case amongst the Tier 2 teams, they're not making that the next step up in the strong case against the Tier 1 teams to we saw Italy and Argentina do previously. A lot of people point out that Georgia are ranked higher than Italy in the world rankings. That is partially down to who you play, as well as how good you are. So if you win all your games, you'll be higher at the rankings, and yes, you get more points for beating someone who's above you, but it's not just because someone is higher than another team doesn't automatically mean they are a better team and would win on the day. Now, I think Italy are in a bit of a mess, and they're going through rebuilding, so Georgia probably would win that game. But the rankings are not as clear-cut as that, and we need to realise that they're a guide. They're not an absolute as to who is best and who is not, or who would actually win a game on any given day. So, yes, I think Georgia do need a pathway into a Tier 1 competition and to be able to grow. But I'm not sure that they are putting a compelling case together currently to force that issue in the same way that Italy and Argentina did previously. Now, what I think there needs to be in place is, say, a defined pathway. How do Tier 2 nations get into Tier 1 and get more competition, get more games and more guaranteed games against higher quality competitions? That is something the World Rugby needs to work on. It comes at the moment. I don't see them doing that. I see them trying to. I think they've got other issues on their plate at the moment, such as clearly the global calendar and how it's going to look after 2019. And another topic that is much higher up their list is around the residency rules that people see, rather than necessarily giving tier 2 countries that pathway to become tier 1. And say, I've talked about the possibility of going to an 8 nations. I'm not sure that is the solution anymore, but it might be, which would involve we'd have 2 conferences. So you'd have England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales on one side, kind of like the Western Conference, and then the Eastern Conference with something like France, Italy, Georgia, and maybe Russia or Romania. But when we say that, Romania's been one of the strongest sides historically, and Russia have been doing well. But we've got emerging nations in Germany, who beat Romania recently, and Spain, whose ladies' side are at the Women's Rugby World Cup, and they also did well, doing well in sevens as well. But they're also emerging side nations. So, if we put a solution in now, what's that going to look like in 10 years' time, or 5 or 10 years' time, when those nations are knocking at the door and saying, "Hey, we want a pathway too"? So, is the end goal here to have 2 tier 1 competitions, one in Europe and one in effectively the rest of the world? Or are we going to try and have 3 or 4 tier 1 competitions that happen annually? And I don't think anyone's even thinking that far ahead yet about what the structure in that kind of sense. We're all just people are just fighting for this one team or that one team. And I don't think we've had that holistic view going on. So finally, one solution would be to go to an 8 nations and have those 2 conferences. I do think that Georgia, Japan, and the Pacific Islands need a pathway to get to tier 1. I think those teams all need to have money, some of that and having some sort of domestic teams, professional teams to retain players. I think they need to have home test matches against tier 1 nations, not just away ones, which is they're starting to get. And I think they also need regular competitions, which things like the Pacific Nations Cup changes every year. It's not a regular competition that people can pin their flag to as to what we're going to do and make commercial decisions over the long term. So those are my thoughts on Georgia joining the 6 nations. A little bit more complicated, and perhaps not as clear cut as you would think as it might have been. But it is actually a bit of a more complex issue than I think people are giving it credit for. Please, if you've enjoyed this, do share this on Periscope, or if you're watching on YouTube, give it a thumbs up. Also, do sign up for the DrivingMaul weekly newsletter, which will actually be coming out today. The link is in the title for Periscope and Twitter, or it's in the notes below if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know your thoughts either in the comments or on Twitter. I always enjoy a good chat about rugby, and enjoy whatever rugby you're going to be watching this weekend. I'm looking forward to the Chiefs versus Blues in the Super Rugby.